I was just thinking about one of my favorite podcasts called Nothing Much Happens. I often listen to it when I go to sleep, and she just tells these really sweet stories. And there's one about I'm hoping, I mean, it kind of looks like it might rain, but it might just be the smoke. But in any case, outside, it just is one of those days where, as she says, nature is inviting us to rest. So I hope that that's part of your day today, taking nature's invitation to rest. Don't know how much of it mine will be, but I will do my best. Okay, so as probably many of you know, a lot of our sutras have a lot of kind of fantastical imagery in them, as we saw when Shanae was teaching us about the Avatamsaka Sutra. There's a lot of palaces and jewels and flowers and incense and flying robes and all kinds of stuff. And I just find this stuff really fascinating. I think I said in my little blurb, this would be a worthy challenge for anybody doing special effects for a movie, if you can try to imagine that. But so I just thought I would, again, trying to put ourselves in a frame of mind that's not our usual frame of mind. Our usual frame of mind is to be intellectual and to analyze and to figure out what it means. And so I'm thinking, the Lotus Sutra and many others like it, they're, Tenkan's not here. I'm going to say it. It's a religious text. So, and they were often recited as devotional practice and, esteemed in ways that maybe we don't really necessarily do in our modern world or appreciate. We always want to go to write what it means. And also, because so much of within some of the parts of the Lotus Sutra are these endless lists. It can be like, can you just get to the point? Well, I want to invite you to listen, to really listen to this and to kind of think about it as how do these images invite us to kind of reach beyond our known world? And I'm going to try to do this with some dramatic flourish, because these were not read, so much as this was an oral tradition. So you can imagine a group of people sitting. They're not going to be like, blah, 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 and reading this long list. It's going to have some theatrics to it. I'll see how I can pull that off. So, chapter 1 of the Lotus Sutra, virtuous conduct. This is what I heard. At one time, the Buddha was staying at Rajagriha on Holy Eagle Peak with a large group of great monks, 12,000 in all. 80,000 bodhisattva great ones were also there. There were gods, dragons, satyrs, centaurs, asuras, griffins, chimeras, and pythons, in addition to all the monks and nuns, laymen and laywomen. There were great wheel-turning kings, minor wheel-turning kings, golden wheel-turning kings, silver wheel-turning kings, and other wheel-turning kings. There were kings and princes, ministers and people, men and women, and great elders, each surrounded by followers numbering in the hundreds of thousands. They went up to the Buddha, worshipped at his feet, circled around him 100,000 times, burned incense and scattered flowers. After making various offerings, they withdrew and sat to one side. The names of those bodhisattvas included Dharma Prince Manjushri, Dharma Prince Treasury of Great Majesty, Dharma Prince Treasury of Freedom from Anxiety, Dharma Prince Treasury of Great Oration, Maitreya Bodhisattva, Leader Bodhisattva, Medicine King Bodhisattva, Lord of Medicine Bodhisattva, Flower Banner Bodhisattva, Flower Light Banner Bodhisattva, King Incantation Freedom Bodhisattva, Regarder of the Cries of the World Bodhisattva, Great Power Obtained Bodhisattva, Constantly Persevering Bodhisattva, Leader in Valuable Signs Bodhisattva, Accumulated Jewels Bodhisattva, Valuable Cane Bodhisattva, Above the Threefold World Bodhisattva, Vimabhara Bodhisattva, Fragrant Elephant Bodhisattva, Great Fragrant Elephant Bodhisattva, Lion's Roar King Bodhisattva, Lion at Play in the World Bodhisattva, Lion's Powerful Quickness Bodhisattva, lion's perseverance bodhisattva, courageous power bodhisattva, ferocious lion bodhisattva, adorned bodhisattva, and magnificently adorned bodhisattva. In all, 80,000 such bodhisattva great ones were there. How does that settle with you? Like, what does that do to your mind? I'm just, it's interesting to kind of like, I mean, do you feel yourself getting impatient? Like, oh my God, how many are there? Fragrant elephant and great fragrant elephant? What about great, great fragrant elephant? It's just kind of like how does that, what is that? I mean, one thing that occurs to me is who's to say that all these beings are not here with us right now? Are they? They might be. Just because we can't see them doesn't mean they're not here. What do y'all think?
One of the things I really appreciate about it is that it makes me feel small.
Ah, okay.
A lot of the things that I encounter in my daily life or try to analyze, I feel like I'm making those things feel smaller than me. And then I feel like I have to manipulate them somehow or fix them or control them. And so it's very relaxing to hear about something so huge I can't think about it.
Yeah. It's kind of like trying to imagine the universe, right?
I was thinking about, like, there was one cane.
Yeah, well, what's that?
So, like, all of these bodhisattvas had some expertise in something, whether it was fragrant elephant. I don't know exactly what that would be. Right. But they all had dedicated themselves to something.
Right.
And they were just, that was their dharma, and they were still bodhisattvas.
And this one's valuable cane.
Valuable
cane,
like a beautiful cane,
yeah,
and used it for the right purpose.
Right.
That kind of jumped out at me.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. It's like, where did they come up with that one? Who knows?
Well, so this was an oral tradition. So you have all these people and they're reciting this morning after morning after morning. So perhaps sometimes when I'm here in the morning and I go through the ancestors, and I think that this list is never going to end. And I wonder if these people could have thought the same thing. Are we going to ever get through this list? Oh, God, I'm going to have to do this again tomorrow morning.
Who knows? I mean, I think that's an interesting aspect to watch in our minds, because that's how our minds function. Come on, get to the point. And I just would wonder about, like, people's sense of time 2,500 years ago. It had to have been really different from ours. It had to have been. I don't know what it would have been, but it had to have been really different. But yeah, it is interesting, and I always that chanting the lineage is a really interesting practice. But I always kind of imagine. What I do is I sort of like imagine what they would have looked like, and they sort of pop up. Each name, they all sort of pop up, and I see them. I'm like, okay, thank you. So yeah.
Well, I work in an elementary school, and also I used to go to pagan gatherings, and it just makes me feel like there's room for everyone. Like, anybody can be anything, and we're all here together in this great celebration gathering.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too. In a society that might have been exclusive of many kinds of people and beings, I don't know. I'm just thinking about the caste system or something like that. Many societies have been that way, where they exclude people for various reasons, most of them nonsensical. So if you're going to include everybody, why not include dragons and pythons and chimeras and asuras and all these different various wheel-turning kings? And so, yeah.
I felt it's just a mind-expanding expression. Everything that's in it. Many of the qualities are pieces of beautiful, fragrance, and the particular power that some creatures might have, but mind expanding is what I think. This is an expression that is going to take you from everyday life and the problems thereof and the way that one relates to something that is completely somewhere else. And yet it's expressing some very deep truths. And just listening to it does something to your mind that is not ordinary daily life. So when I hear it, you cannot penetrate it
Right.
the way that you penetrate and solve problems
Right.
daily. So it becomes something that sort of floats into your mind. Your mind cannot penetrate it and solve it, and it takes you somewhere else.
Yeah, which I think is that's a human thing.
Yeah.
To want to go somewhere else. You know, I mean, and, you know, now it's, you know, social media and, you know, yada, 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 and people are just constantly doing this. You know, everybody I see waiting at the bus stop, you know. And, I sat with yesterday I worked and I sat with a dying person who didn't have anybody to sit with them, and, you know, and I was going to go up there and I thought, well, I'll just hang out with him until he passes. And it was about a half an hour. And then I thought to myself, I can bring my phone. I thought, no, don't bring your phone. That is just the silliest thing ever. It was just like this momentary thought, I could bring my phone and sit there and do something while I'm, quote unquote, waiting for this guy to die. And I thought, don't do that. If you're going to go sit with him, then you sit with him. And you just sit with him and be with him and watch him. And, so it was just, but that momentary thing, well, what am I going to do? Am I just going to sit there? So anyway, he had a very peaceful death. I'll just say that too. So, yeah.
I find it so encouraging to think about 80,000 beings dedicated to Dharma.
Yeah.
I just want to come and hear Dharma.
Yeah. 80,000. No, we're going to get into some bigger numbers than that. So.
It also makes me think of before I started learning about plants and before I started learning about them, I'd like go on walks and just kind of like, oh, there's nature. But then once you know like all the names, then you start going on a walk and you're like, oh, there's this plant. Oh, and there's this plant. And so it's like, you can imagine 100,000 beings, but it's very different to imagine the great, what was it? The
great fragrant elephant.
The great fragrant elephant.
Yeah.
And the great fragrant. It's different if you like name them all, and it kind of helps you to imagine it even bigger.
Oh, that's a thought. Yeah. Yeah. You could say there's 80,000 beings there. I'm like, okay, that's too abstract. But you start naming all these different, beings that are there. It kind of, you can create this, this image in your mind of, oh, wow, they were all there. It's kind of like that. If anybody's ever seen the paintings of the Buddha at Nirvana at his death. I know that the U of O Schnitzer Museum has one. It's not always up, but everybody's there. Good guys, bad guys, animals. I'm like, everybody's there. So, there's sort of like these sort of demon beings that are hanging out. So it's again that nobody's excluded. I wish I put that up again. It's quite it's huge. The one I'm thinking of. I think there's a couple of three of them, but it's the one that they have there that it goes floor to ceiling. So, okay. All right. So I'm going to read another one, and this is one of my favorite ones. And I don't know what it is about it, but maybe you'll have some ideas. This is chapter 15, Springing Up from the Earth. At that time, the bodhisattvas, the great ones, who had come from other lands and were more numerous than the sands of 8 Ganges, arose in the great assembly and with palms together greeted and spoke to the Buddha, saying, "World-honored one, if the Buddha will allow us diligently and devotedly to protect and embrace this sutra, read it and recite it, copy it, and make offerings to it in this world after your extinction, we would teach it everywhere throughout this land." Then the Buddha said to the whole group of bodhisattva great ones, "Enough, my good sons. There is no need for you to protect and embrace this sutra. Why? Because in my world itself, there are as many bodhisattva great ones as there are sands in 60,000 Ganges. And each one of these bodhisattvas has as many followers as there are sands in 60,000 Ganges. After my extinction, they will be able to protect and embrace, read and recite, and teach this sutra everywhere." When the Buddha had said this, the earth of this 3,000 great thousandfold world trembled and split open, and from it innumerable tens of millions of billions of bodhisattva great ones sprang up together. These bodhisattvas all had golden-hued bodies, the 32 characteristics, and immeasurable radiance. Previously, they had all been living in the world of empty space below this world, and when these bodhisattvas heard the sound of the voice of Shakyamuni Buddha preaching, they appeared from below. Each of these bodhisattvas was the leader of a huge group, a following as numerous as the sands of 60,000 Ganges. And this is not to mention those who led followings as numerous as the sands of 50,000 Ganges, 40,000, 30,000, 20,000, or 10,000 Ganges, or those who had followings as small as the sands of 1 Ganges, the sands of half a Ganges, a quarter of a Ganges, or as few as 1 part in 10 million billion myriads of Ganges, or those with as few as 10 million billion myriads of followers, or 1 billion followers, or 10 million, 1 million, or just 10,000, 1,000, 100, or even 10, or those who led 5, 4, 3, or 2 disciples, or only 1, or those who were alone, preferring solitary practice. Such were they then as to be innumerable, unlimited, beyond comprehension by powers of calculation or parable and simile. It's a really interesting statement. By powers of calculation or parable and simile. All right. Can you even imagine those numbers? I mean, the sand of the Ganges is like really fine, from what I understand. It's like mud. So if you've got as numerous as that much sand, 60,000 times 60,000, that's a lot of beings.
Speechless.
Speechless, yeah, I know.
I think it's quite interesting that we're made up of like all these tiny little bits, these like little atoms and, quantum or like whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that all those are imbued with, some sort of life.
Oh, interesting.
And that just talking about how,
Yeah.
like how many is that? Maybe that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if we think of ourselves as, probably within each of us, there's at least 60,000 Ganges worth of sand, right? Potentially.
Potentially.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way. That's a really interesting way to think about it. Kind of looking at, and I think there are other sutras that talk about what would sound to us like atoms. I can't remember. I think the Avatamsaka Sutra does.
Yeah, they definitely refer directly to stuff like that, but
Yeah, but more than that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Is there a sense of humor to it, or is it taken seriously?
I don't know. It is kind of, I don't know. That's an interesting question. Could be.
Well, I feel like it points to just the symbolism and the superfluity of words and numbers, and that we use those as constructs to understand something, but they're just symbols. They're not. There's another way of feeling and being in the world that doesn't involve those words and numbers.
Yeah.
And so you can use them or not use them, but there's another way of experiencing.
Yeah.
Well, I always feel that the whole book of the sutra, the whole thing is like in a galaxy far, far away, in a time long, the whole Star Wars thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in the here and now.
Yeah.
It's not in this realm.
Yeah. Or maybe it is. And
Or maybe it
or
is.
maybe we just can't see it. I don't know. It's in.
I have another slide.
Mm-hmm.
So within those numbers, it seems like everything is included.
Mm-hmm.
So, and everything's revolving around everything else. So we're all we're all bodhisattvas. We're all following somebody. We're all part of like everything it's just like everything is there. So how do you describe that? And that is one way.
Yeah, you can imagine people, let's go, wait a minute, what about these people? Yep, them too. Oh, wait a minute, what about those? Yep, them too. You go, well, we can't exclude, yes, we're not excluding anyone. You can imagine people in the audience raising objections to who's included and who's not, you know.
Well, if anyone saw the movie Moulin Rouge, Ewan McGregor and Nicole Kidman, but the first 20 minutes of that movie are just surreal. They're literally an Albanian dwarf falling out of the ceiling singing songs from music. And I watched the director's cut of that, and he said he did that on purpose. He wanted to make that first introductory thing so bizarre that people watching the movie would just drop everything they brought in with them to the movie. They would just have their minds broken open and not have any preconceived notions. And then after that happened, he started the movie. And that's how I think about a lot of this Dharma imagery, is we have to let go of our ordinary preconceptions in order to understand this other way of knowing. And so maybe some of this is
I think that's a really good point. You know, it's like dropping everything you think you know, that doesn't make any sense, but it's not, that's not the point, right? Yeah. To make sense in the way that we usually like to make sense of things. Yeah.
I find it kind of hopeful just because there's so many great beings.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, this is wonderful. All these great beings. And I'm like, I've heard to keep an attitude of change, you need an attitude of hope.
Mm-hmm.
And so at least when they start talking about these wonderful beings, it inspires me to want to make our world better from that place.
Yeah, because we certainly are. Oh, the sun's coming out. Maybe we're not a day of rest after all. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, there is so much change happening, and I, just kind of I think it's, at least it's easy for me to be kind of hopeless a lot of the time. Like I was saying earlier to Joe, and fire season just always depresses the daylights out of me. I'm sure it does other people too. You look and you go like, oh God, this smoky skies, and it smells terrible, and that there's a bunch of fires, and you think about people in other parts of the world like Maui, and just that's devastation. It can really bring you down really quickly, and how to have hope in the face of all of that kind of stuff, among other things. Yes, Moxie.
I think that when I first started practicing Buddhism, that I didn't really like this kind of passage. It made me feel like I was outside of Buddhist practice because of the devotional nature, and I felt like I had to believe that these things actually happened in a certain place, or that I wasn't really Buddhist, or I wasn't doing it right, or I was confused or something. And I think part of that was my experiences with some other religions, the way that they will share scriptures and things and say, this really happened, and if you don't think so, then you have to be quiet or you should leave, so it kind of hit that spot of, well, I really like all of the useful practical stuff in Buddhism, but can we hold the 50,000 devoted ones, or
just kind of put that over there?
But it has changed over time. It doesn't feel heavy, because I think there's so much silence included in Buddhist practice that it feels like just be showing up in your own life as though there's those 50,000 beings is more useful to me.
Yeah. So and really, how I don't know that. I mean, maybe it happened that way. I have no idea. But what difference does it make whether it did or didn't? It's like, what do we learn from it? It's like a lot of stories in any kind of religion. So many of our religious teachers in history have had miraculous births of one sort or another. Jesus born of a virgin, the Buddha walking 5 steps as soon as he was birthed, and I think even Zoroaster had some kind of explosion of light. When he came into the world. So. But the point of whether it really happened that way, we're so stuck on that in our well, it really didn't happen like that. Just kind of, that just puts a dead stop to any kind of discussion. But that's not the point. So I'm glad you brought that up. So beyond all the large numbers, I'm just curious. I really think it's really interesting, the first 3 paragraphs of this one. So these bodhisattvas, only as numerous as the sands of 8 Ganges, offer to the Buddha that they want to protect the sutra. If he will teach it to them so they can recite it and protect it and teach it to others. And he's like, nope, I got it covered. You know, you don't have to do that because I got way more bodhisattvas than what you have. What do you make of that? I mean, it's just kind of an interesting thing. And then as soon as he says that, all of these beings spring up from the earth.
I think for me, it feels like a reflection of what a lot of people are saying and experiencing. Also, my felt experience of reading these texts, which is like a decentralization of yourself in the story. So this sort of like Buddha, please let me be the one to venerate this text and spread it. He says, you're not. You are a grain of sand and innumerable Ganges, and there's something that's totally humorous about it.
Yeah.
That's okay. I got it.
Yeah.
But something else that happens too. That you are, a diamond woven amongst a vast, tapestry.
Yeah. And I like that. It's just kind of like it's like we want to do it. And I don't think he's not, I appreciate the offer, but no, we got it. And then all these beings come out from the earth. The other thing I think of is that they could be us, the Buddhas, the bodhisattvas and the Buddhas to be that are not yet, they're coming out from this, I don't know what this empty space below is, but not those who are unborn and they suddenly arise. And it's kind of interesting. There's plenty of bodhisattvas in the future, and we'll just keep teaching it and passing it on and passing it on and passing it on. Yeah.
I think in a way, all of the discussion about you don't have to be the one to do this. There's plenty of us and all that. It also, I think, takes away that pressure that I used to feel to believe this one little text, like I've got to carry it myself all by myself and believe in it. And it's more like, here it is. Oh, you don't need to believe in it. It's just there. It's just happening.
It's just happening. And I think a lot of what the Lotus Sutra is about, at least in from one perspective, it is about skillful means. How different people hear different things, and how you can carry it, how you can carry it, how I can carry it, how you can carry it, and it doesn't all have to be the same. It's not saying you have to believe it this particular way, otherwise you're out. So I think that is not what Buddhism is. It's you take it's not I'm not saying pick and choose. I'm saying, how are you hearing the whole thing and how are you carrying that forward? And it can be lots of different ways. Go.
Yeah, I was thinking about this as we were chanting the great compassionate heart to run these goals that are, talking about Prajnaparamita and how that's the miraculous is supreme and true practice.
Yeah.
And I think about that passage and how let's venerate this sutra, this teaching, and make it the thing, right? This is the show. Versus, I was just thinking about what was it like before Buddhism. There were bodhisattvas before whatever we call Buddhism in my language here now, right? Because that has a story and that has some labels and people who made that happen. And so, there were bodhisattvas and enlightened ones before and after, whatever this is, because this will pass away too. Right? So there's a practice and a truth that isn't dependent on just the particular words we say or chant or think about, even though it's helpful and amazing and wonderful, and who wouldn't want to say, do this? Let's have this big sutra party and make it our whole lives. There's more than that.
A sutra party? Let's have one. Yeah. Or a sutra, I don't know why I get my sutra shindig, but Yeah, that's interesting. Just to, there are those moments where like this is the truth, but I think digging into that, you would find, this is the truth. Not just this. Interesting.
the big numbers, not
Uh-huh.
just the whatever the 8 Ganges, 60,000, big numbers, but then how it wound back down
Yeah,
to just
even just
a
one.
quarter, and all these women, or not even having one, just sitting there by herself. So it kind of, again, comes back
It's
to
really, really interesting. I mean, can you imagine? I just imagine like somebody sitting on a big boulder and just like, there's like thousands of people out there and he's just like, 60,000 Ganges and 8,000, even just one, and just, really kind of almost the fire and brimstone version of Buddhism, Okay, I got one more I'm going to read the whole thing, but this one is really super interesting. Like none of the other ones are as well. Let's see. There's a lot of where I always feel like this sounds disrespectful, but if you've ever watched a Bollywood film, they're like all, maybe there's like a bunch of people get shot or something and they all fall to the ground, and then like within a second they all stand up and start dancing, and then they go back to fighting. It's kind of the way these, in a lot of these sutras, it's like, and then he decided to say it in verse. So there's a lot of, there's prose and then there's verse, and then there's prose and then there's verse. It's just such an interesting pattern, So let me see, which one's going to be this? This is the Blessings of the Dharma Teacher, chapter 19. Then the Buddha said to Bodhisattva Constant Effort, the Great One, if any good sons or good daughters receive and embrace this Dharma Flower Sutra, or read it, or recite it, or explain it, or copy it, they will obtain 800 blessings of the eyes, 1,200 blessings of the ears, 800 blessings of the nose, 1,200 blessings of the tongue, 800 blessings of the body, and 1,200 blessings of the mind. With these blessings, they will adorn the 6 faculties, making all of them pure. Such good sons or good daughters, with the pure physical eyes received from their parents at birth, will see whatever exists, whether exposed or hidden, in the great 3,000 great thousandfold world, the mountains, forests, rivers, and seas, down to the deepest purgatory and up to the highest heaven. They will see all the living beings in it and recognize both all of the causes and conditions and all of the effects and consequences resulting from their past actions. Then it goes into verse. Let's see. I'll read what happens when you get the 1,200, I think, is it the 1,200 blessings of ears? Yes, 1,200 blessings of ears. What's more, constant effort, if any good sons or good daughters receive and embrace this sutra, read or recite it, or explain it or copy it, they will obtain 1,200 blessings of the ears. With pure ears, they will hear all the various words and sounds in the 3,000 great thousandfold world, whether exposed or hidden, down to the deepest purgatory and up to the highest heavens. Elephant sounds, horse sounds, cattle sounds, sounds of carriages, sounds of weeping, sounds of lamentation, conch sounds, drum sounds, gong sounds, bell sounds, sounds of laughter, sounds of conversation, sounds of men and women, sounds of boys and girls, sounds of the righteous and the unrighteous, sounds of suffering and of delight, sounds of common people and holy people, happy and unhappy sounds, sounds of gods, sounds of dragons, of satyrs and centaurs, of asuras and griffins, of chimeras and pythons, sounds of fire, sounds of water, sounds of wind, sounds from those in purgatories, sounds of animals and hungry spirits, of monks and nuns, of Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, of Bodhisattvas and of Buddhas. In some, though they have not yet obtained divine ears, whatever sounds there are in the 3,000 great thousandfold world, whether exposed or hidden, they will hear and understand them with the normal pure ears they received at birth from their parents. And while they will be able to distinguish all these various sounds, their ability to hear will not be harmed. So, what do you make of that? Like that kind of puts a different spin on Avalokiteshvara, she who hears the cries of the world. No, she hears everything. She hears everything.
So would that being the thousand blessing of thousand arms or something too?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. The thousand arm bodhisattva, right, can reach in and support and help anyone. I mean, one thing that occurs to me is that, I don't want to hear that. Nope, not going to listen to something I disagree with. Not going to have that conversation with you. Talk to the hand, all this kind of stuff that, that especially in our really polarized society. But, I feel like that's an invitation really to maybe not necessarily have a conversation, but to hear and listen to everything, be able to hear everything.
I think that if I spent my time copying that whole sutra, I really would have all the special powers, just because it would crowd out all the time that I spend doing useless things or stuff that messes things up or causes problems.
Right, yeah.
And if I took all that away, I'd probably do really well.
Yeah.
Before I started coming here and sitting Zazen alone, I try to have a very quiet room, right? And, throw the dog outside, everything super, super quiet. And when I came here, I think the first week, someone was using a hacksaw and they were like just tearing up something horrible. I don't know what, it could have been a grizzly bear. Powerful. And over time, I've really grown to appreciate all those little distractions because it does feel like a blessing. I'm really encountering myself in that moment. What happens when I hear a power saw or someone having an asthma attack last week, or, and you discover yourself in a way. Does that irritate me? Does this, it made me think about, things? It's just distractive practice. And it's an interesting way to just encounter yourself, like this is my reaction to my world. And I can just let it be the world so I can see me rather than try to control everything.
Yeah. I remember Chosen Bay's a teacher at Great Vow Zen Monastery when she was practicing at I can't remember the name of it, Maizumi Roshi's place in Southern California. It was in a sort of a vibrant neighborhood in Los Angeles. Let's put it that way. It was not quiet, and she said that a lot of times there was mariachi music playing and partying in the streets. When they were having sesshin, and it was just part of the scenery, just part of the backdrop. And you just learn to, you're not going to go outside and tell the folks to be quiet because they might for a few minutes, but it's the same here. Somebody drives by with a really loud, boom box in their car. And I remember too, I did a day-long retreat here. I don't think she's not here anymore. Her name was Ding. Do you all remember Ding, who was here for a few months in the spring? So we were sitting back there in the backyard, and somebody walked by and sneezed. And there was a dog barking, and a car drove by. And she said this really profound thing. She says, I could have been in my grandparents' village in China. Just the sounds of the world around me are just the sounds of the world around me. The sneezing, the dog barking, somebody driving by. And it just struck me as really profound, that that's the underlying hum of life is that stuff. So anyway.
I think it's really beautiful that when it said the blessings of the ears, that I automatically jumped to and maybe they'll say this grand thing of you'll have the best hearing and you'll
hear beautiful
really
music.
Yeah.
No, you're gonna hear elephants farting.
So again, it's kind of humbling.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's you can hear everything, but also be in the present, but also you're everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a really good point. It doesn't really talk about hearing just the good stuff. It talks about hearing everything.
And how quick we are to decide what we like and what we don't like.
Yes, that's our
Judging mind.
that's our friend picking and choosing, right? In the affirming faith and mind. Just I mean, of course there's sounds we don't like, but we just have to kind of go, yeah, okay, there it is.
And it struck me just how different senses got either the 800 or the 12.
I know. I'm not sure I wouldn't know how they decided that.
The nose. Why does the nose only get 800 blessings?
Well, we could read about what you're going to be able to smell. I'm not sure that's super interesting. Yeah. Well, okay, the fragrance one actually has some good stuff. It has, I'm not going to read the whole list, but sumana flowers, jatika flowers, malika flowers, gardenia flowers, patala flowers, red lotus flowers, blue lotus flowers, white lotus flowers. So, well, okay, get down to the odors of living beings, of elephants, horses, cattle, sheep, and men, women and boys. So yeah, it gets into the other side too, So
Just the 1200 versus 800
yeah,
makes some
yeah,
sense.
it is interesting. Yeah.
Attended a meditation retreat once, and mostly quiet, but every now and then these sounds. And it was, I think, meditation on the Heart Sutra and emptiness. I was thinking to myself, every sound is a reminder of emptiness. Every sound is an opportunity to distinguish between the sound and what I impose on it, the meaning that I impose. And so I found benefit in the sounds being sound of emptiness.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just that, I think it's really hard for us to just hear something, see something, smell something without our mind. And what is that? What is that? And if we don't know what it is, we spend a lot of time trying, what is that? What is that? Rather than just, okay, it's do we just smell without having to have any kind of discourse in our minds about it, as an example? So, okay. Anything else?
Well, not to speak for anyone's experience, but I'm reminded of folks that say are born without an ability to sense, use one of their senses, and then later there's technology like a cochlear implant for this or like that. And there's a lot of stories and people I've worked with personally where they've had the surgery, never heard before in their life, and so they have this device that's able to let sound come into their mind because we can hear with our mind, not our ears.
Right.
And it's horrible. You can't distinguish me and you talking versus what's outside. Versus,
that's interesting.
All the sound doesn't have categories to fit in.
Because they didn't grow up with that ability to categorize and name and label. So I mean, it is useful. I'll give you that. We have to have filters, otherwise we would be like that, where it would just be sort of this.
Well, and what I find kind of interesting is that in a way, Zazen is almost like being that cochlear implant state when you're really deep into it and not even really stressing. Because you're wanting to let go of what are my categories and notions, what makes sense to me, versus just letting things teach me. So I think that just looking at the blessing one helps me freak out a little bit less. Just like when I actually let go of my thoughts and let myself really be here, which sometimes can give me a lot of anxiety.
Sure. I've gotten up and left the Zendo hall before. It just for being highly anxious. I've done it, not recently, but I have in the past. I was like, I'm out of here. I've got to go now. So yeah.
But it's okay.
Yeah. It's like I was like, okay, and I'll go back. So.